Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all fandoms, welcome to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 154. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the technical first/second podcast of November 2020. The last podcast I did, episode 153, that was technically before November, uploaded on November, but I recorded it in October, so semantics at this point. But yes, I'm bringing you another quick podcast that just has me on said episode. I'm going to say right now it is currently raining. I think England has once again fallen into a storm or is being hit by some kind of mild storm. I can't really do anything about the weather, so I'm sorry if it gets picked up on the mic. It shouldn't do, but I apologize if it does. But as I essentially said, this is going to be another very small podcast, simply because there honestly wasn't a lot to really cover, as I think the main three things that have essentially taken everyone's attention, or four to some extent, which I'm going to get to in a bit. But first I'm going to kind of talk about the things that I did over the last 2 weeks or since the previous podcast, which has been quite eventful in a sense, but also it's been a bit hectic to some extent. Not the most exciting stuff, as I'm about to tell you. So for the most part, I managed to 100% Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time. This is just getting the secret ending or the 100% completion. There is 106%, which I've not gotten yet. And I'm honestly debating doing that, given how absolutely stressful it was to even achieve said 100% completion. The main reason that is because I decided to do the replay value incentive, I guess you can call it, which is the insanely perfect relics, which I'm pretty sure I've explained these before, but essentially you need to beat the level, collect everything minus one thing, and do that all without dying once. So basically you have to do a level and complete it perfectly. And given some of the issues I've talked about before, being the long loading times whenever you have to restart a level, the cryptically placed crates which you need to break all of them, and what was the other thing that was bothering me about it? Oh yeah, and the fact that a lot of the levels are just way too long, and it's a bit unrealistic to ask players to essentially perform something perfectly for upwards of 8 to 13 minutes. There is one level in this game which is 13 minutes long, and it's quite brutal, but I managed to do it in honestly not that many tries. I'm not going to say what level it is because, spoilers, it is still a brand new game. But for those of you who have played the game, you probably might know which level I'm talking about. All I'm going to say is it's within the last few levels. Yeah, it's that level. Not necessarily the last level. In my opinion, the last level, a lot of people have not necessarily complained, but said it's like pretty difficult. And I would say it's difficult, but to be honest, once you know what's coming, it's honestly a pretty decent challenge, and I like that level. But yes, I did, all the insanely perfect relics, all of them. I'm not going to say how many because that's a spoiler. And it was rough, it was stressful, it was torturous. And I honestly think that Toys for Bob, the developers of this game, should have reworked it in a way. I was thinking that one way they could have done it is they could have done it as a tier system. So instead of it being that you have to beat every single level without dying and collecting everything, how about there's a tier system where if you die 5 times or less than 5 or no more than 5 times, then you get the sapphire perfect relic. Let's say you die 3 times, you get the gold, which you only need gold to, get completion in the game and obviously get your trophies and achievements. And then platinum can be for no deaths, which is basically just bragging rights, how it used to be. But for some reason, Toys for Bob decided not to do that. I don't really know. I think they were just kind of being a bit malicious about it. But that's done. I'm kind of on a break from that game. The only thing I have left to do is the time trials and the flashback tapes, which I don't think they're going to be as hard as the insanely perfect relics, but we will see. And hopefully I can get this game 106%ed. I don't really have the money to be buying any more games, so that's probably all I'll be doing over the next 2 weeks. Hopefully I can get it done as soon as possible and move on to the next game, because it'd be nice to be able to have completed and 100%ed all of the current new Resident Evil games, being Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, and Resident Evil 7, as well as the previous Crash Bandicoots all the way up to 4. So that'll be pretty cool. Another thing that I did over the last few days, actually not too long ago, was the fact that I cleaned out my fish tank, which is currently in my living room. You'll find out why this is, I guess, important or matters, but essentially that water was not clean. We lost one of the goldfish a little while ago, and I decided to clean out everything pretty much. And in doing so, it was tiresome. It was like a 2.5 hour process, but I'm really happy with the way it now looks. And the one goldfish we have, he seems pretty happy. So that makes me happy. One thing that was kind of awful about the whole situation was for maybe over an hour, had my hand in ice cold water. And I think that's kind of messed up my hands and my body because, I don't feel too strong in my hands. And I've kind of got a lot of pain from, carrying a lot of water and doing all kinds of stuff. It basically messed up my back and my hands. And I think I have like some mild case of shock, which isn't great. And at the same time as well, I feel like I may have done a self-diagnosis. And I think I have a mild case of stress, I guess you could call it. I've not fallen into anything like depression, but I'm kind of panicky a bit at the moment. I've realized now that in the wake of lockdown, which we'll talk about in a sec, I've essentially got lots of things done and wanted to do lots of things, but in the process I've given myself too much to do, and I am stressing out about not getting said things done, because sometimes it happens, because I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to take days off. And the reason I don't like to take days off is because almost every single time I've taken a day off and decided, hey, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, I've always regretted it the next day, because someone will always say, you now need to do this for me, and then I've lost 2 days and now I've fallen behind on things. It's not necessarily my family's fault, it's just how my life is, but yeah, that's why I don't ever try and take days off, or at least don't tell people I have a day off, because there's some people who just want to take the mick. But in terms of things that happened over the last fortnight, I think the main 3 things or 4 things that people have been talking about, which I kind of can't really talk about and there isn't really much to cover, so I guess I'll briefly go over them real quick, is I guess the biggest one as of right now during October, November, well mainly November 2020, just for archive and reference sake, was the new elections in America are taking place. It was Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, and at time of recording, I'm pretty sure Joe Biden is now going to be the next president of the United States, which is awesome, because let's be honest, given the results and given how the last 4 years have been, I don't think anyone actually likes Donald Trump. I don't like to get political on these podcasts, but I don't think that's an extreme comment. If not in America, around the whole world, he's quite possibly one of the most hated people on earth right now. Almost rivaling Hitler to some extent. And I'm pretty happy and excited by the fact that Americans have kind of decided, you know what, enough's enough. And they want change, because at the end of the day, Joe Biden doesn't necessarily have to do anything. He just has to not shout, and he'll immediately be a better president. Because Donald Trump didn't do anything as far as I'm aware. He hasn't benefited the country. He hasn't brought any change. All he's done is destroyed that country's reputation. And I'm really happy for America that they're actually going to have a chance, they're actually going to see some kind of change, whether it be slow or fast, because you guys need it. You guys have been through hell over the last 4 years, and hopefully things get better over there. And I think Joe Biden, or even the next president, or the next few presidents, will hopefully fix the mess and fix the reputation that you guys have been dealing with, and then hopefully your tourism will increase. You just kind of got to deal with your suicide rates and the whole race issue you guys have going on there, with tensions between you mainly just hating anyone that isn't white. Not everyone, but police enforcement and other people. Once you guys get that fixed, then hey, maybe you might actually be considered a nice country, but till then I'm staying well away, much like most people are. But besides that, the other thing I think people have been talking about is the fact that Sony has now pretty much released the PlayStation 5, and Microsoft has released the Xbox Series X. Still a stupid name for a console, like Series X. Like, what? Series 10. Like, it's not even the 10th console. X means a lot of things. I don't know why they went with that name. They should have just called it the X, to be honest. But besides the point, most people have it. Most people are bragging about it. Most people are playing either Dark Souls or what's the other game? Bug Snacks or Spider-Man Miles Morales. So people are pretty much hyping over that stuff. And you know what? All the power to them. I hope they're enjoying their new consoles and having fun. I am going to wait on the consoles just to see if I can get some more games. I did sneakingly have a look and see how the performance of the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 performs, because if there's one thing I'll criticize the PlayStation 4 for, it's awful loading times, which I think were kind of abysmal. But it kind of seems, as far as I'm aware, that playing PS4 games on PS5, it is roughly about a 15 to 20 second increase in loading time, which I'll be honest is a bit disappointing. I kind of want my games to load a bit faster. This kind of just keeps the discussion or argument as to why PC gaming is much more superior just more relevant, because if I remember correctly, most PC games load in 5 seconds max. I'm surprised Sony wasn't able to do that, but whatever. At the end of the day, I'll just take out my phone and just look at stuff while I wait for a game to take 20 seconds. It's not that big of a deal. I'm not an impatient person, but I do expect games to be at least loading a little bit faster. My expectation is your game needs to be loading in 10 seconds. If it's taking any longer than that, then I'm going to have issues with it. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting that came about over the last 2 weeks, which I don't care about, but I'm glad people are enjoying it, is The Mandalorian Season 2. By far the only thing worth watching on Disney Plus as of right now. Disney doesn't really have much going for it other than a few one-off specials, and if you don't have the box sets of The Simpsons, then I guess you can watch it there. But yeah, The Mandalorian, I don't really know anything about this show. I don't know what it's about. I heard it's good. I don't like Star Wars, therefore I don't care about this series. But I know people have been raving about that. People have been really trying to shove that down your throat. I understand you're excited. Finally, after 45 years, something good has happened thanks to Star Wars. Because the last time anything good happened with Star Wars was obviously the Clone Wars animated series directed by Genndy Tartakovsky. That was the last good thing, in my opinion. I don't think anything, you can call me whatever, I'm very pessimistic towards Star Wars. I think most, or at least 90% of anything to do with Star Wars has been absolute trash. But besides the first film and the animated series, being the Genndy Tartakovsky's The Clone Wars. But, if people want to enjoy it, they can. Just, stop screaming about it like it's the greatest thing in the world. Let's move on to stuff to actually talk about. And I only have one thing to talk about. I think it was the only thing worth talking about, given all the things I've just mentioned have pretty much been the main talking points of the last 2 weeks. It's all anyone is talking about. You go on YouTube, everyone's got the PS4, everyone's got Series X, everyone's playing Dark Souls. You go on Twitter, which is a wasteland of disgusting garbage, and it's just politics. And then anyone who wants to talk about TV is talking about The Mandalorian. But I've already kind of discussed that stuff. The main trailer I want to talk about is for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion, which I'm guessing is going to be a one-off special documentary film type thing that's going to be airing on HBO Max. And damn, HBO Max has got some serious clout about them as of right now. Damn, I'm really enjoying the kinds of stuff they have. They have most of Cartoon Network / Adult Swim's back catalogue on there as well. I just found out that Space Ghost Coast to Coast is on there, 9 seasons, which is fantastic. They also have a couple of shows as well that I really enjoy, shows like Infinity Train, Close Enough. They got that one other Cartoon Network show where it's on the island, Summer Island Camp. I can't remember what that one's called. I'm not a massive fan of that, but hey. And yeah, so many other pretty interesting stuff happening over there, really putting Netflix to shame for the most part, because Netflix is kind of garbage at the end of the day. But yeah, the reunion for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, one of the most iconic comedy sitcoms to date, maybe. Of course, there have been other shows that have done similar things like this, really received certain success. Obviously think of shows like Seinfeld and Cheers, and obviously Frasier. Those are some, iconic sitcoms and comedies. Everybody Loves Raymond, a couple of others that I may be forgetting. But this is definitely one of those ones that definitely was kind of a big deal at the time, because obviously you had Will Smith, who at the time was a singer, rapper. He was kind of like the main star of the series. He is still, relevant today. I think most people know who Will Smith is. You have the fact that it was a show that had a all-black cast, which, for the time being, early 80s, early 90s, and a show that really, looks it to some extent. It's the only really outdated thing about the episode is, the fashion, funny enough. And it was pretty interesting because it's become a very iconic show. And it stood the test of time given the kind of stories and the general ambiance and the characters and everything about the show just worked. And that's why this show kind of does get talked about and is getting a sort of reunion documentary. And I think this one is coming from a very heartfelt place. I do love the idea of it just being the original actors coming back to the original set and just talking about the show. I love stuff like that. I love roundtable discussions. I would much rather have the cast, how old they are or whatever they're doing, just come back and just talk. Just talk about this love letter they unintentionally created. As opposed to them doing a one-off, let's do an episode, because it wouldn't work. And already it seems like it's going to be a very faithful and very heartfelt documentary film. I don't quite know what it is, but it is interesting that they do reference James Avery, who, for those of you who don't know, was Uncle Phil, the iconic Uncle Phil, as he passed away a couple years ago, which is immensely sad, but he was such an iconic character that they would be remiss to not mention him. So I'm looking forward to seeing the section where they talk about him, as well as I'll have my tissues ready for that section too. Fun fact about James Avery, he was also the first voice of the Shredder in the original animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was him. That was James Avery, aka Uncle Phil. So that should be really interesting to see. I'm also really interested to see just a lot of the other actors and characters' perspectives on being on the show and being in the series. So, for example, DJ Jazzy Jeff, who plays Jazz in the series, he kind of had a bit role, and I mainly know him, but most people mainly know him as kind of a DJ beat creator. He made a lot of the instrumentals for Will Smith's songs. So it obviously was crazy because he's not an actor. He's a pretty well-respected and famous DJ. So I'll be very interested to see and hear his experience on the show, because most people know him as, Will's, not too great friend who always got flung out of the house in that comedic way. As well as the fact that the original actress, I cannot remember her name right now, who played Aunt Viv, is going to be joining the reunion. And if I remember correctly, she got fired very early on in the series, or left the series. I can't quite remember. And it's going to be very interesting to see both actresses that played Aunt Viv, to kind of see their perspective and kind of shed light on what happened from that personal experience. What was it like to, leave a show that became so iconic, what that feeling was like, as well as, the lady who, took her role. What is it like to kind of fill that role and take the, fill the shoes to an extent. So I'm actually really interested to see what's going to happen with this series. It definitely looks like it's going to be a very calm and peaceful, kind of interesting series. And hopefully it's accessible for young audiences who maybe only know of Will Smith for his later stuff. They might know him more as like a YouTuber. They might know his children. They might know of him through his children, like Jaden and Willow Smith, and other stuff. So I'll be very interested to see what happens, because it is a very interesting show. And for those of you who don't know, I did grow up watching this show. It was definitely a very interesting experience, and it's a show that I remember they showed it during the 2000s, like early 2000s. That's when I believe I watched it. I most likely watched it during the 90s as well, but I remember being shocked when I found out that it was a show from the 80s, because I was like, what? Because even watching in the early 2000s, the show was still fresh, pun intended to some extent. And yeah, it's just stood the test of time, especially a lot of the stories and the concepts and the ideas that represented in it. It was, I'm not going to say it's the greatest written show of all time, but it's still prevalent to this day. They reference it in the trailer, but the episode where, Will deals with, his father, and not to spoil the episode too much, and the kind of back and forth relationship or rocky relationship that Will has with his father, and that very iconic and powerful scene where, Will says, why doesn't he want me, or why doesn't he love me anymore? And, when Uncle Phil just kind of embraces him and kind of, just, that is just powerful. There are other episodes that deal with some very interesting and introspective stuff, like, for example, when it deals with, lots of, like, situations dealing with relationships. I know there's a very funny episode where, it kind of deals with masculinity and femininity in the gym. It deals with, like, Will having to take on a lady who, is kind of, dismissing all of his, maybe you could look at it as harassing or maybe sexist comments, which I think it kind of was intended to be that way, but she is just as bad as him to some extent, a very flirtatious character who, is up to no good, that has a great resolution at the end, which is quite funny, and lots of other stuff that's very iconic and interesting that happens within the series. But hopefully this series turns out to be, or this documentary film, whatever you want to call it, does turn out to be pretty interesting. Hopefully it's long too. I don't want them to skim out on any of the juicy details, so to speak. And yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast. I told you it was going to be a short one, but like I've said many, many times before, I do not like talking about stuff just for the sake of talking about it. I don't like adding filler to the podcast, regardless of if it's just me on it or I have 10 other people on it. That's not what I like to do. But as it is November, we are going to kind of keep within the theme of remember, November kind of stuff. And we are going to kind of go back and pick some older videos to be the video of the episode. And the first video of the episode I'm going to use for this month, which I'm going to have to go and check real quick, because my computer went to sleep and I'm terrified that it's going to stop the recording, because sometimes when it locks me out, recording stops. That has happened, and I do not want that to happen again. And the video of the episode I am going to pick is going to be for the from the artist Emapea. I believe that's how you spell the name. It's Emapae. I think that's the right spelling. Yeah, I'm just checking the spelling right now. Yeah, Emapea, that's how you say it, with Good Old Days. This is a music video by a slightly underground independent artist, and a great music video was made using a film from, I believe, the 80s or 70s, and I just love this song because it's so chill, it's so great, and it kind of feeds into the theme of remembering and, the good old days. I do love a lot of these samples used in the song as well, and I think the film and how they've chopped up scenes from the film works perfectly, so you get a good idea of the film itself without, watching the whole film. I love, like, AMV kind of videos. I believe that's how you say it. Yeah, anime music videos. I do like that kind of style and how that's kind of been a massive and prevalent part of YouTube culture, and I'm glad that it's still alive today, and it's still being done today as well with other people's songs and, scenes chopped up from animes with rock songs and all that kind of stuff. But that's pretty much going to be me on this podcast. I don't know what's going to be happening on the next podcast. I might try and get some people on the next podcast, but do not hold me to that. One thing that's quite interesting that I've been trying to figure out is how we're going to do the end of the year podcast, because, yeah, it's fast approaching. The end of the year is very, very close. We are just weeks away from the end of the year, weeks away from the end of Christmas, or Christmas itself, which I don't know for many of you if it's going to be cancelled or not. And yeah, I don't know how we're going to do the end of the year podcast, but the one thing I can guarantee you is that we will do it somehow, and that it probably is going to be short, because I know for a fact we ain't been doing much, and there just hasn't been much. I mean, for goodness sake, there hasn't really been films coming out. I would argue there's probably only been about 50 films come out this year, not necessarily just in cinema alone, and some of those have been disappointing. But I digress. I guess I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.